Hello, everybody, and welcome to another weird episode of Radiorama. I say weird because this one is being kind of done, I don't know, ass backwards. So, this is a Columbia model 360K record player. It'll play 78s and 33 RPM records, and you're wondering, oh, yeah, I don't see a record player. It's because the record player has already been worked on by one of our members named Kyle. I didn't know this, but apparently the LP, long playing record, was invented by Columbia Records, and they were very proud of that. This is their LP trademark. And so this unit probably came out somewhere in the 1954, 1953 era. Columbia almost more than likely had this farmed out because they were a record company. They weren't a manufacturing company. So who knows who made this? I don't know much about Columbia. I've worked on a few of their things. This actually still works. What happened is that we went to a little antique show or a vintage fair yesterday, and one of the people that were there, they said, "I have a bunch of record players in my store. Do you want them?" And we're like, "Sure, why not?" So she gave us two Columbia record players and an Admiral. This is the nicest one of the bunch, and we had these sitting, on a table that said not for sale because they're not restored yet. And a guy came by and he's like, oh, I'd really like that if you guys get it fixed up. So we're like, okay. So even though it works, it does need to be recapped. And unfortunately, while this side, the grill cloth is in good shape, it looks like a cat had its way with the left side. So I'm going to have to replace the grill cloth. I went to the museum and got some. Also need to rebuild the chassis, take the chassis out. I suspect this is a selenium rectifier. Ordinarily, I do replace them, but being this is a record player, it probably wasn't used near as much as a radio would be used. So I'm not that concerned about it. I think I'll probably just leave it be, just make sure the B plus is still good. And it looks like in order to get the grill cloth replaced, these panels will have to come out. And how that happens, I'm not really sure. I think there's some screws here. Oh, here's the controls. Apparently the controls have been cleaned already, so I don't need to worry about that. This capacitor is just sitting in there loose, so I think someone replaced that at some point because it would never be in the factory like that. Here's the output transformer. It has 4 total speakers. These 2 bass speakers, and then these 2 guys aren't really speakers per se. It is probably a piezoelectric material, and oftentimes those corrode and don't work, but who knows, maybe they still work. So I'm going to pull the chassis and then pull the side panels off, get it all apart, see what I got myself into. I wasn't really intending on working on this today. I was going to work on this large console, but I figured, it's already apart. We already have a willing buyer, so let me go ahead and finish that. And I'm gonna have the whole day off. Actually, today is I think it's the first official. I think last year maybe, I can't remember. It's Juneteenth, but anyway, for those in the USA, happy Juneteenth. So let me take this apart and we'll see what's going on inside. All right, well, here is the chassis. Not really much to write home about. It's kind of interesting. We have what appears to be 2 rectifiers. We've got this guy and this guy. Am I reading that right? I guess so. Anyway, I may be wrong about the electrolytic having been replaced because it does have a holder for it. So that could be factory original. Even though I'm looking, the soldering is pretty sloppy here. Anyway, it luckily is a floating chassis design because here is the common negative of the can coming to this point here, which is not going to chassis ground. What we'll want to look for is what capacitor goes to chassis ground, and I believe it's this guy right here. because that's coming off of this same shared common negative. So we'll need to replace that with a safety cap, X2, Y2 across the line, 0.01 rated microfarad capacitor, because that will reduce the amount of current that can get to the metal chassis and subsequently the record player. That's kind of important. This value is probably like way too big, so someone would get a little bit of a jolt. Other than that, we have a whole bunch of paper capacitors. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's actually more capacitors than usually I find in a radio. We have 2 more electrolytics here, so there's a lot of electrolytics in this chassis. Let's see here, there's 4 here and 2 more here, so there's 6 electrolytic capacitors in here. Notice the common ground just came off. That's okay. It's interesting that this is rated, these are all rated 450 volts, which doesn't make any sense because this doesn't have a power transformer. So it could only be, like, the maximum amount of voltage in this thing is 120 volts. So I'm going to disregard that. Maybe what I'll do is I'll see if I can find this online. I think Radio Museum might have it. Then I can look at the schematic and confirm everything before I make that assumption. I've seen stranger things. So let's do that before I get too carried away. Alright, well, I usually don't do this, but since this had so many electrolytics in it, and they're hard to see, I mounted them on a terminal strip and just wired them all in. So now that we've gotten the electrolytics replaced, it's time to mindlessly replace the rest of these paper caps, all 16 zillion of them. It looks like there only is like 1 or 2 values in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 047 rated caps. That's easy enough. This is probably a coupling cap. It's probably going to be like 0.01 or something. Coupling caps are important. If these goes out, no, it's an 05. Oh, whatever. Where's this guy? 003. 01. This big fat guy. This is again the grounding cap. I need to make sure and replace that with the safety cap. So what I do with these guys is it's pretty basic. I just like snip one end like that, and then I tie in my new capacitor and then snip the other and then tie it into the other, and that way you don't lose your place. I know it sounds dumb, but I've done it many times. Oh yeah, I did look at the schematic. Everything in it's basically the electrolytics are 150 volts and below. So I'm glad, because otherwise if it had really been 450, those capacitors would have been very difficult to put in here. They're big. Alright, well, they're all replaced. I kind of have to admit, like, I want to get through this thing because I want to work on the German console over there. But I did this all in 30 minutes, basically. So here is our safety cap going to ground. And all the other caps have been replaced. The question is, does it still work? There's nothing worse than having something that worked, and then you work on it, and then it doesn't work again, or it doesn't work. Another thing I'm noticing here, this is clearly a cutout for a power transformer. So either this chassis was used in something else, or maybe there was an initial plan for having a power transformer unit versus it being a floating chassis set. There's a lot of holes cut out where stuff could have gone. So I'm curious about that. What it could be. So I'm noticing there's a knockout here from some more speakers. It could be, I know that I've seen a Columbia console. So it could be maybe they had this in a console version, and it might have had a power transformer. I just don't know. And I'm really not sure. I'm not familiar with this brand so much. But I am going to shove this back into the cabinet and hook up some speakers and see, just make sure it still works. Okay, here goes nothing. Was it on 78? No, it's on 45. That's way too...
Little red wagon, I would love to pull you down the street. I'll bet all the kids will be jealous when they see my playmate so sweet. Hold tight till we come to the hilltop, then we're gonna coast down the hill, you and me. Won't you ride in my little red wagon, 'cause you are my sweetheart to be.
Interesting. It's like it's wanting to pick up radio, even though I know it's not possible to, but it sounds like radio. That's weird. You can, well, that's cranked up all the way. You can hear the motor coming through a little bit, but that's okay. The good news is that it doesn't blow up, so we're well on our way to having a happy record player. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is run a safety test, and what I want to see is what the actual current potential is for this when it's on. And there's not much exposed metal on this. This screw, for example, definitely is exposed, and it's right next to the tone arm. So I'm going to test it off first. 0.02. That's probably the neutral side. And let's turn it on. Great. Turned off. All right. Now let's try it. 0.3. My 2-volt scale here, maximum is 0.6, 0.6 of a volt. So we're about 50% of that. So what that means is, say if somebody were to, for some reason, touch that screw and then stand on a concrete floor in bare feet, that they might get a little bit of a tingle, but they're not going to get jolted. Like if they had touched it with the original value cap in there, they probably would have gotten quite a bit of a jolt, because the one that was in there was literally 10 times greater in value than what's in here now. So it passes safety. So now it's been like kind of quote-unquote modernized to be safer. Well, I decided instead of replacing the grill cloth, I'm going to fix it, because when I looked, it looks like there's quite a bit that folds over the other side, so I could probably maybe just cut some of that off. And since this is in the back of the corner of the set, hardly anyone's going to see it. I can just cut the bad part out and glue some new stuff in, just kind of like work it in there. Alright, so I patched it. Does it look perfect? No, but I think once it's on the machine, you're not really going to see it. So now, I'm going to clean up the cabinet a little bit more. I started this last night by dousing the whole thing with Old English, but I'm going to douse it some more. Just trying to remove some of these horrible scratches. It's like someone set something on top of this and gouged it, and I'm not about to refinish it. I'm just not a good refinishing person at all. So I'm going to go over this whole thing with it, let it soak for a little while, and then I'm going to go over it with a buffer and a car wax. Alright, so now it's time to polish and clean up the case. I'm going to use a Carnauba car wax and my mechanical buffer, and this helps me save my hands. And we're going to bring back a lot of the sheen that this originally had from the factory. This makes all the difference in the world as far as how it looks. All right, that's after the first pass. It's still really scratched up, and so I think what I'm going to do is use some Novus number 2 scratch remover. It's for plastic. Truth is known, it works on anything. It works on paint, it works on gloss, wood finishes, anything. It's just a mild abrasive, and it looks like baby crap. Alright, she's all back together again. Finish turned out to be a lot better than I thought it was going to turn out. A lot more shiny. And it's a good sounding unit, actually. Here's my little repair here.
Well, I never was a rugged man,
but I like a rugged man.
Well, that's my problem now.
Anyway, I'm going to let it play for a little while just to make sure it's all good to go and hunky-dory, and then in a couple of weeks the guy can come and get it. I know this was kind of a weird episode, but thanks for bearing with me if you made it this far. So until the next time something comes across my workbench, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.